Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Illumineers Quest podcast, where we talk everything Lorcana. I'm Zach, and joining us today is the world famous from crazy stuff that Michael says and does, Michael.
Hey everybody, thanks Zach. Super excited to be here today.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting one. We've been talking about having you on for a long time, and it's finally been a good day to do so because we're in between Atlanta and Chicago, and then we had a local tournament today. So there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about, especially with Set 4 coming out and all that fun shenanigans as well. So
It's a crazy time. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of changes.
yes, so I mean that's going to be the big thing, is because Atlanta was obviously set 3, Chicago is going to be set 4 next weekend, and so we're in this new era now, and I think we've both started to feel a little bit of that uncomfortableness that comes with learning the new sets, and so we're going to talk about a little bit of that too.
For sure. I'd say Inklands was the first time I started to feel really comfortable.
Yeah.
And so then to switch up right after that, definitely adjustment.
Yes, I completely agree with that as well. I mean, I think towards the end of it, you start to get comfortable and then it gets uncomfortable again. But set 1, I definitely wasn't comfortable at the end. Set 2 was just Ruby Amethyst nonsense that I definitely wasn't comfortable with at the end either. And so, yes, I think I would imagine a lot of people are in that boat. But anyways, yeah, we got a lot to talk about today, so let's just jump into it. As always, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting. If you're buying your singles, check us out on our affiliate link down below, and we appreciate all the support as always. So, with that said, we're getting into the card of the week, as always, and we're going over to Michael for this one because he's got a pretty hot take one that's coming up fast and furious in the meta these days. So,
yeah, I played against it today at our local tournament, and so it's going to be Ariel, the treasure collector.
yep.
So it's a 6-drop, uninkable, 3 strength and 4 willpower. So it is a ward, and then it has an ability. The girl who has everything. While you have more items in play than each opponent, this character gets 2 additional lore on top of the 3 lore that I already quest with.
Yeah, so I mean, it turns into another one of those Sapphire high questers like Bell or Tamatoa that interacts with a lot of the other stuff in play. And the kicker here is the combination of ward and 3 strength, because with all of the removal of today, you've got Medusa that takes away the 3 strength or less, but you can't get Medusa because of ward, because you have to directly attack it, and then you can't get Sisu'd or ice blocked or any of those shenanigans because it has 3 strength. And so it sits right in this very neat little spot that makes it extremely hard to remove unless you have a Be Prepared or a clean board with Lady Tremaine, which most people aren't running these days. And so I think that the Sapphire Steel lists are very, very starting to lean into Ariel because she's insane. I mean, the 5 lore plus a dime is very, very hard to deal with.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how do you see this playing with Bell?
Yeah, I think Bell is still necessary. The uninkable counts that the Sapphire Steel and the Ruby Sapphire decks are running is really high already, in the 18 to 22 range. And so my assumption is that it somewhere sits in a split between the two. But I think Bell still has a lot of utility. I think a lot of people continue to overlook her ability to double ink and to help you ramp. Mm-hmm. And so, especially for the Sapphire Steel decks where you can a whole new world, anytime that she can double ink to help with that ramp and dump your hand so that you can, use the whole new world and get the max value out of it, she continues to have that value as well. And so I think there's a little split 50-50 where, Bell has utility early game but can then, be played for cheaply late game and then use dime. But Ariel is just like a menace to, take off the board. And so from that respect, she's insane.
Oh, for sure. How do you see it keeping Sapphire Steel in the meta?
Yes. So, we'll definitely talk about that a little bit going into the Chicago stuff too. But I think it made it a much, much better matchup into most of the meta game, because the problem that it had before was just that Bell was your closer, and it just got removed relatively easily, and now you don't have that problem with her. And so I think there's a lot of potential to have that same type of late game closeout that you get with the Ruby Sapphire, that you get with the goats from Ruby Amethyst and so forth. So yeah, I think it's going to be a menace to deal with. So that's a perfect choice for the card of the day. So you already touched on it, but I think let's talk a little bit about the first local Set 4 tournament today. So we had a win-a-box tournament at one of our local stores, and it was the first time that we have like truly played Chapter 4. I mean, we've played in League once together, but this is the first like real competitive setting to like really get a feel for how everything's going to play out. So yeah, what were your thoughts on the Chapter 4 tournament today?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a large learning curve just because, a lot of that, it's the first time really playing in person where everybody had the cards.
Yes.
I've just been trying to accumulate the cards for what I wanted to be able to play.
Yep.
Going in for the first league night of Chapter 4, we were still just helping you guys practice for Atlanta.
Yeah.
And, so I made a change in my deck because I'm an Emerald Steel player, or at least I have been. A little bit of a... kind of turns that I don't know if I necessarily like the play style for myself in Emerald Steel. So that was an adjustment.
Yep.
But I think there's quite a few options out there that do look really fun. So it's still kind of working through what I want to play this set.
Yeah, on the surface, you hear Emerald Steel, and a lot of the core is still there. I mean, you obviously have the Ursulas. You have, your shift targets or your bigger bodies to get into, like your Robin Hoods and your Beasts that have been there the whole time. But the play style has definitely changed. You go from Merfolk Flynn 1-2 to like a shift target, whether it be Pegasus or Robin Hood or Diablo or something turn 1 to then turn 2 Bucky. And so the actual like the way that the game plays out is very, very different for Emerald Steel, and I think that's what you're referring to today, and the changes into the actual gameplay mechanics of the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, at the end of the day, learned a lot about all the decks. I know you had a pretty successful day. What were your thoughts?
So I went 12-0. We had 6 matches. I 2-0'd every match, which is very, optimistic, obviously. I just kept thinking to myself, man, if this were Chicago or Atlanta or Dallas, like I would be in top cut right now because I would have 6 wins, which is basically what you needed to get there. So obviously I feel really good about it. I think I've had a little bit more practice on some of the lines and different scenarios that you haven't gotten into yet, just because of the online community and all the stuff that have a little chance to do last week that you didn't get into. But so I think I'm a little bit ahead of the curve from that sense, just because I did prepare a lot for this weekend to try to be ready for this tournament. And so I feel like everything went well, but I don't know if I'm like ahead of the curve or if I've like really just got a lock on how everything's going. So obviously feel really confident, but I also am kind of wary of like, is it just me being ahead of the meta or really playing well into the current meta, or is it because I've got it all figured out? And I guess time will tell, right?
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so I won 18 packs. I got 3/4 of a box because we did split the finals. We were there and we left at like 7:45, and neither one of us had eaten dinner, and my finals opponent had a 3.5 hour car ride home to get to work tomorrow, and so we were both like, let's chalk it, I want to go eat. So the winner would have gotten a full box, but we were both like, let's just get out of here and go. Haven't had a chance to open the packs yet to see if I've gotten any enchanteds or anything crazy. But yeah, it was a really fun time. I don't think even the tournaments that I have had success in, I definitely haven't 2-0'd everybody like that. It's definitely a lot of 2-1s, and so it's a great start to the set. But again, I really want to see how everything develops over the next couple weeks, especially after Chicago, and you see a lot of great performances come out of there, and what everything turns into going into the set championships and into Dallas. So. Yeah, so fun tournament today. First real exposure into Chapter 4. First real exposure into like the refreshed competitive scene. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in our expectations going into Chicago. But yeah, I mean, I think without further ado, we need to talk about Atlanta. I know we're a little late on the episode because we weren't able to record like right after Atlanta for the follow-up episode right after it. But I don't want to just like talk about like our experience necessarily, but there was just so many different facets and alleys to discuss that I think it's worth the discussion. And I mean, from the crazy off meta deck winning, which I think all of the local people that we talk to, that we communicate about this with on a regular basis, were all just like, what happened? Like, how did this? And so we'll get into that a little bit, talk about some of the side events, talk about the atmosphere, talk about my experience. But yeah, it was Atlanta was a fantastic time. I'm really glad I got an opportunity to go. Probably most exciting, one of our local community members made top cut. So we were all like so rallying behind him because it was just such a fun atmosphere to be around, to be able to just continue to cheer him on and to see his game after game continue to just perform at the peak. And so that was really, really fun as well for our group that we went with. But yeah, you didn't have the chance to go, unfortunately. So what do you want to know? Like, what's your main question? Because I know that you had a couple things that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So I mean, it was the first one. What was the vibe or the environment like?
Yeah,
being there in person?
mean, it was insane. It was insanity. I mean, it kicked off the weekend by Ryan Miller, one of the creators of the game, kind of giving a speech. I mean, it wasn't really a speech. It was more just like a hurrah into the weekend and thanks for all the players and thanks for the community and all that stuff. And so it was really cool to see him and to have him around. He stayed for the weekend and signed autographs and took pictures and all that stuff. And so it was really crazy to see that. But overall, it was just a ton of excitement. I mean, I think everybody was super excited to be there. Everybody's super excited for like the first real big tournament. I know there have been like unofficial, pretty big tournaments for $5,000, $8,000, $10,000. But I don't know. It felt like the atmosphere was so much more fun, and maybe that's just my naivety, between the whole thing. But I think everybody there was super excited to be there and super happy to be playing and super jazzed up by all the side events and all of the promos that were available from like the promo, not the ones that you win from the top cut, but like the promo wall prizes, for the promos that came from that and all of the boxes and stuff you could win. Yeah, so I mean everything around. I mean the atmosphere, the experience, the way that they had everything set up, the like the management of the whole weekend, from getting your badges to getting into the event to checking in to all of that stuff. It was all really flawless, and so I was really excited to just be able to get in there and focus on playing because everything else was so seamless. But,
yeah, I mean, it sounded like I know a lot of our local teams, they went and they did some of the side events. I know you played through. What did you hear about some of those side events for those that are looking to go, but maybe don't know how competitive they're going to be, or maybe even just getting an attendee pass?
Yeah, I think the attendee passes are way underappreciated. I mean, and I know that the attendee passes are sold out for Dallas, and so I know it's not that they're not, sought after, because they definitely are, but they had everything all day long. It was anything from, drafts, which I know people love. They had sealeds, they had starter deck challenges, they had constructed challenges, they had team challenges, which I left like relatively early on Sunday, and so I didn't get to do the team one, but that's the one that I really wanted to do. It's where you have 3 people and you all play different inks, and then you play as a team, and if 2 of your 3 team members win that round, then you get the 1 point. And so it's really cool because you're all, you have to strategize on the inks, you have to strategize on the decks you want to play, you have to strategize on who plays who and all that sort of stuff. And so that's one that I've been really interested in doing and that I think is a lot of fun. But yeah, the thing is like, let's say you 0-3 and you call it from the main event. It's not like your weekend's over. There's genuinely enough stuff to continue to do through the entire, even like top cut day 2, because they continuously run stuff. They continuously have opportunities for you to stay busy, whether it be from the vendors to buy or to trade, or to try to get tickets to get stuff from the prize wall. I was really shocked that it wasn't like you lose a couple games and your weekend's over, and then it's like sitting around just like kind of on the sidelines waiting to see how everybody else's game goes. Nonstop action for you to stay involved the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a blast. I wasn't able to be there in person. I do have my ticket to Dallas, so I'm super jazzed to be able to go to that. I do have one other question, though. I haven't asked you this one. But What was your most unexpected thing about the weekend?
I mean, I guess this will take us into the next topic, but it has to be Joshua's winning deck, right?
Oh, my goodness. That was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll talk about my stuff real quick before we get into like the larger event and the larger placements and all of that sort of stuff. But I had 41 points, so I went 13 wins out of 18 rounds, and you needed 14 wins out of 18 rounds to make top cut and to get into the top 128 to get the Let It Go promo. And so obviously that's a little bit bittersweet, but my final placement was 180 out of 1990. So I mean, at the first big event like this, first first iteration of like going into something this big and having to deal with the craziness and playing that long, like all day, and having to deal with everything that goes along with that on staying hydrated and staying fed, so you're not sitting there, not being able to think because you're so hungry, and so all of the things that go along with that. I mean, it was really, rewarding, honestly, because you see all of the work that we've put in paid off as much as you want to make the top cut and get the what seemed to be tens and tens of thousands of dollars in prizes. Obviously, not everybody's going to win that. I guess the kind of getting into some of the unexpected, some it to be expected as well, but like everybody in our group had completely different matchups every time. I didn't play a Steel Song deck the entire day. I know people in our group played 4 Steel Song decks. One of the guys in the group played Ruby Amethyst the first 4 rounds, like back to back to back to back. I played Ruby Amethyst once. And so, again, I think that goes back to the Chapter 3 meta that we've talked about quite a bit on the podcast, but it was so diverse and so unexpected that you really didn't know what you're getting yourself into. It was like, you sit across from the person and everybody's very guarded on what they're playing because you want to make it very unknown so that you have, even the slightest advantages going into that first game. And yeah, it was crazy because every single one of us in our group had a different experience based on who they were playing because you didn't know what was coming. So, I think that's a testament to how good the game is. But.
Yeah, and just even the meta we just came out of, it was great.
Yeah, and then I guess I have to make one more quick thing before I forget to say this because it was kind of a one-off, but I'm sure a lot of people know Tia Beastie or Tia Boyson, who hosts a lot of the online and bigger tournaments and stuff, and I actually got the chance to play her in like round 5, and she mopped the floor with me, I will say that, and no joke, 5 minutes. So I said this last time, but as a refresher, I played the good old Ruby Sapphire Control Dime deck, and she was playing Amber, Amethyst, hyper aggro, and so it was literally over in 4 turns both games. But I wasn't even mad because she was so nice, and I got to talk to her for about 10 minutes after our games were over before the next round started, and she wanted to get up and go, get a drink or whatever it was. And so she was super nice, and so it was super fun to meet her because she was like super down to earth and talked to me, and it was great to see the people that are very influential in the community like actually care about the game and actually care about the community and are really not just a show for everything. So it was really cool to get to do that too. But okay, Joshua's deck.
Should we cover it a little bit before the top?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, we probably should get. Like,
there's a whole top 8 shenanigans getting close to with a Judy, a Spellbook, and a Goat.
Yeah, we probably should talk about getting into that too. So I guess quickly we'll like go all the way. So shout out Devin, who I think we've talked about a couple times on the podcast, but he was the local community member that made top 64. He was playing Sapphire Steel. He dodged Ruby Sapphire the entire day 1. Unfortunately, day 2, he got it round 1 and lost, but he still made top cut, top 64. The guy that beat him made top 8. Mm-hmm. So, he lost to a clearly very good player as well. So,
and talking about things unexpected, 72 card deck list.
The guy that beat him was the one running the 72 card deck list, which is insanity. He basically had everything in it. He had Hades, he had Let It Goes, he had all of the Ruby Sapphire tools that you would have used from Chapter 1 through 3 because he had that many cards in his deck. But, it's crazy to see that anything can win, like genuinely. It's a lot of matchups, it's a lot of smarts, it's a little bit of luck. But, yeah, I think there was just a lot of fun times. I watched a lot of the stream for the day 2. They did a fantastic job with the production as well, so that was really fun to watch and to be a part of, even though I wasn't in the room anymore. But yeah, I guess let's start with that top 8 game because that was a wild one.
Yeah, I know we were texting about it while it was going on, but a little bit of setup. We had a Ruby Amethyst versus a Ruby Sapphire.
Was that the guy that beat Devin too? I think it was. Or
no, because he didn't make the top. That was to make top 8.
Was that
right?
No, I think I don't remember. I know. Yeah, it was the Ruby.
One of the two. And it was complete shenanigans. I kind of lose track just because of how crazy the ending was. But there at the end, so the Ruby Amethyst player was sitting there at 19 with a spellbook on board.
With the spellbook on board.
Yeah, and so. They had to find some sort of item removal. Yep. And so the Ruby Sapphire player, he's digging through his deck, finally comes across a Judy Hopps.
Yep.
Is able to get rid of the spell book.
Yeah.
The only thing that can save the Ruby Amethyst player is a goat. What'd he draw?
Which, of course, he top decks a goat.
Top decked a goat.
Yeah, and there's been from what I understand at least, I did, like, at the time it didn't cross my mind, but I guess, looking back on it, it does make sense that he was kind of so distraught and assumed that the game was over at that point that the guy that was playing Ruby Amethyst that got the spellbook banished kind of reached out and, like, shook his hand in a concession type of way from what everybody says. And so there's a little bit of controversy as to, did he actually concede as he was shaking the hand and pulling the top card off the deck, which then happened to be the goat, and then threw it down? I didn't really think that much into it. Again, like, in the moment, maybe it's a little different, and maybe if you're, like, in that, you could fight it a little bit. But it's one of those things where it's like, dang, I lost one of my games to a top deck goat. That's why you play them. That's why you play them.
Goats do goat things.
Yeah, that's why you play them, because it's insane. And it can save you in situations like that. But
it was a super good match, though.
Yeah, I mean, they were I would fair to say all of the ones that they were on the stream, that were on the live broadcast, were incredible matches. I mean, I can't think back to one where I was like, wow, that was incredibly lopsided, or just not fun to watch, or not a lot of great plays, because you continued to see why the people that made it that far, because they were that good. I guess I would say another thing I really liked a lot too is, you see all these big names and all these content creators out there and all these, quote unquote pros that, play a lot and have a lot of influence over the meta, and you assume that all of these guys are going to make the top cut. And, we had the conversation going in early on Saturday that there would probably be a lot of unknowns that would make it that far. And while there were, I think 3 or 4 like really, really known people that made it into like the top 16, top 8 to get a Mickey, getting into the finals match like we're going to talk about, there was definitely a lot of unknown people, and they brought it home.
Yeah. I mean, even, do you want to talk about the interview of the runner-up?
Yes, that was going to be my next point. Is one. So I don't know if anybody else saw it, or if this is clipped online anywhere, or if it's. I think they saved the streams on YouTube, so I think there's like the Lorcana channel that they have everything saved to, that you can go back and watch this. But the runner-up that going into the finals match. So at this point he wasn't the runner-up, but going into the finals match, they interviewed him and they were like asking him about the finals, and they were asking him about like the preparation and getting ready for the match and what his thoughts were and everything. And I don't remember the exact first question that the interview asked him, but his response was, "Oh, I wasn't even going to come this weekend. My girlfriend talked me into coming and said I should just give it a shot and see how things go. And so I'm here, and I'm in the top, and I'm going into the finals now." And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, this kid didn't even want to come. I tried and studied and tested my butt off to get to the top cut, and unfortunately fell a little short. And this guy's pulling the shenanigans of, I don't even want to be here. And then after that, he made it even worse by saying, the interview asked something along the lines of, what did you do to prepare to get this far? And he was like, oh, I haven't even played in a couple months. It's been a couple months since I've even picked up cards, so I'm just kind of out here having fun. And so I'm sitting here thinking again, like, what is going on? Like, I'm trying so hard to get here, and he's just out here having a fun time, and it ends up in the finals.
But you know what, though? He played great.
Oh, for sure. Not that he didn't. No, again, he clearly deserved it. If you're making it to the finals, you deserve to be there. It's just, to me, it was very funny and ironic, because I'm sitting here, like, throwing my hands up in the air and, like, exacerbated, because it's like, man, this guy is clearly that good that he can just, like, walk into the biggest tournament, the Disney Lorcana tournament of all time, and just end up in the finals.
Yeah.
Like, you have to really know your stuff, regardless of if you practice or not. So that, I think we both had a good laugh about that one for sure, too.
Yeah. But getting to the big news, though, I mean, that Mufasa deck. Not any Mufasa deck. A purple
Fasa. Yeah, so I that was definitely the news of the weekend, was purple Fasa winning. I say this all the time. I imagine if you're listening to the podcast, you at least have an idea of who won and what the circumstances were, or have seen the deck list. But my number one takeaway, you asked me what was surprising. My takeaway and most surprising thing was, how has nobody thought of that before? Like, a mind-blowingly good and just such a concise deck build, and I don't understand how it had not been thought up yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's comments that are made, right? Of like, oh man, now that there's these different color Mufasa decks, you kind of go through all the colors just as you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
But I think one of the aspects of his deck that just completely shocked me was a 1-drop Cinderella, who's a 3 singer.
Yep.
with no songs in the deck.
Yeah.
Like,
not even friends. Like
Yeah.
no friends.
But almost where it was, more of a, a character play deck. Whereas to be able to play off of Fairy Godmother, to be able to exert a character like a Pinocchio. I mean, that was just genius.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, he thought of some really, like outside the box things. The Cinderella is the perfect example. The second example, which I think a lot of people like conceptually understand and conceptually try to make happen, and it's punishing for removal. If you're getting Be Prepared, like how do you put yourself in a position where like you get some sort of value out of that? If you're putting yourself in a position where you're going to get taken away, you're going to take it out like a Mufasa, then you can flip a card off and replace the Mufasa. And so everything he did had a consequence for his opponent. If they're removing a snake, then the snake's probably going to positively trade it into anything. If you're going to remove a fox, you're definitely having a 1-for-1 trade because that 4 strength is going to take out just about anything. You have to be careful what you're playing because of the whole Fairy Godmother line, like you talked about. Then you get to your Mufasa, and I always tried to figure out a way to make Mufasa and Perdita work together, but they always seemed to be very conflicting strategies, because Mufasa, you want to flip something really strong, right? You want to flip a Chernabog, you want to flip historically a Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, you want to flip something that's going to have a lot of impact when it gets flipped off Mufasa. He didn't really care, it seemed. It was just like, I want a body back on board. If it was he even flipped a couple like foxes and snakes off of it and then had to banish it because there was nothing left to pull back or to bounce, and so he didn't care. It was crazy. And then you get to the Perdita stuff, and I know you and I both like loved the Perdita as well.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're talking about that whole engine that's being created there, it was really off the Perdita, but pull back that Cusco. Because then being able to remove that to then get a card, I mean, that was that draw engine that he was able to create
every single time. I mean, it was without a shadow of a doubt. When you saw a Perdita come down, you knew instantly a Cusco was hitting the board.
Oh, for sure.
And so the draw was, the way that he was drawing was just such a outside the box way of thinking that we all loved it. We were all just like dumbfounded at how astounding it was that nobody had thought of this before. Because again, you think about the meta. You have your ruby amethysts, your ruby sapphires, which are very Be Prepared and direct removal heavy. You remove it, that's fine. I'll just flip a card and get another one off of it. Then you've obviously got all your steel stuff and then if you're removing the rabbits, then you're getting cards off of the rabbits. And so everything he had played had a consequence for you challenging or getting into him and into his position. And so it genuinely like made me rethink a lot of things in the way that you play, because you're trying to create a very push-pull system, and everything that they did to Joshua had a very big consequence that went in his favor. And so it was so props. He deserves everything he got because he killed the meta.
Oh yes, and you kind of said right there, like his ability to play that bounce package. Like if I was playing him, I would do a deck check on the number of rabbits that he had in that deck. It was just like rabbit, like back and forth. He just was able to get that draw power off of that rabbit more than I've seen.
Yeah,
really, probably anybody else be
sure.
able to get value out of it. It was just he played it to perfection all the way. I mean, at the end of the day, he beat the meta.
He did, and I feel very safe saying that he was the only one playing that deck there. Or any iteration of it there.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I lost to an Amethyst Amber, like hyper aggro, but that was your Lilos, your Maleficents, 1-drops that both quest for 2, your Piglets, your Pinocchios that quest for 3, like the Arthur type stuff. He was definitely the only one that did that, and as crazy as it is, it was so fun to see that, because it just like, I think again, it gave us the confidence on like, anybody can do this. Like if you can come up with something crazy that kind of, kicks against what everybody else is trying to do, then you can win. And so from that respect, it was really cool to see too.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good transition to what I assume our next topic is going into Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's really, and let's say Chicago, but any of our other challenge tournaments coming up. It's the one thing that kind of really gives me hope in this new meta, like it's still evolving, it's going to change, but knowing that there's likely always something out there that somebody can brew up and be successful.
The meta is definitely starting to shape up for set 4 going into Chicago, but as fast as it's moving, I wouldn't be shocked if something unexpected wins. I'll put it that way. Going into Chicago now, we're a week away. There's basically 3 big decks. There's Emerald Steel that's still out there in a pest with Bucky and Diablo. You have the Ruby Sapphire ramp removal deck with your Sisus now powering the removal engine behind that. And as we started off this episode with the Aerial, you have the Sapphire Steel ramp dime deck as well. And all of those are kind of like in a circle and, all doing a good job kind of taking each other out. Diablo and Bucky, if it gets going, can really be a problem for Ruby Sapphire. But Sapphire Steel seems to have the early removal that can deal with all of those pesky little characters that get played out early. But I think Ruby Sapphire still has the edge against Sapphire Steel, and so it's a very much like a kind of tic-tac-toe or rock, paper, scissors meta that we have coming up. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's why I'm excited to see what comes out of this weekend. So
yeah, I'm really excited to see how Chicago goes going into Dallas. I think it'll give us a good maybe kind of blueprint of what to expect initially and see where we need to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, and it's crazy to even say this now because it seems like we're so far out, but after Chicago we'll be I'm looking at the calendar real quick, but after Chicago, which is this weekend, we're basically 3 weekends away from the first set championship. And so, that's not that far away. So the Chicago meta is going to really drive what a lot of people are trialing in that time window. And so, yeah, I'm really curious to see because, it's crazy to say, we're right around the corner from the first Ursula set championship weekend.
Yeah. What do you think? My concern is that there's so much stuff happening in this set, like back-to-back between challenges, like you said, between the set championships. Are we going to see as much brewing like we saw that Jonathan was able to do?
I think that means that there's going to be even more because I think that there's more opportunity. Last time the set championships was across 10 days essentially, right? And so across those 10 days, there's not a lot of time for people to pick up on new stuff, to test it, to get comfortable with it, and then try it. Whereas now you have Chicago, a couple weeks later you have the start of set championships, and the set championships go every weekend for a month now. And so that's a big difference as well. And so you have basically 2 months of changes to really kind of be brewed and to be, countered, or if you will. So I think it'll make it a lot more drastically changed over that time frame. Maybe not, from different set championships, and it can obviously vary from local community to local community for those set championships. But in general, I think there will be a lot of stuff that pops up that counters whatever the meta deck of the time is. And I say whatever the meta deck of the time is because, quite frankly, the 3 right now might not be the meta ones in a month. That's what we've seen that can happen.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it shakes out, how it continues to evolve. Yeah, because I think it's definitely going to.
Yeah. So again, what are your expectations on what does well? I mean, again, going into it, my initial thought is those 3 big ones, the Bucky, the Sisu, and the Aerial are going to be the most represented. I think the Ruby Sapphire is probably the strongest deck. I know for the last week people have said Diablo Bucky, but I think a lot of people, that was we've seen a lot of these rampant problems, and then everybody kind of figures it out, and that to me seems like one that people are starting to figure out. So I think Bucky's still going to be great. It won the first big online tournament for set 4 that finished today. But yeah, what do you expect the breakdown of the top cut to be?
Yeah, being partial to Emerald, since that's been my color, except for the weird Floodborn days.
We had a good banter on that one too, that you tried to shun me from the Emerald group, even though I said I'll go pull up the episodes on me talking about the John discard if I have to, so I can be a foot in the Emerald gang still. I'm not fully removed, but anyways. Yeah.
I kind of foresaw this one coming, though, at least with the Bucky piece of it. Bucky was really big at the beginning of last set.
Yep.
People figured it out.
Yep.
I do think something is going to continue to evolve in Emerald Steel. Emerald Steel changed a lot over the course of last set.
Yep.
As I was kind of on that roller coaster. However, I really think that, Sisu is going to be something we have to deal with. Sisu is going to be tough.
Yeah.
We already talked, like you've already said, Sapphire Steel is going to be big. I do think that Ruby Sapphire still has the bit of an edge to it just due to the removal. But the one I'm really hoping something comes out of is, I have a lot of ideas, haven't really been able to get anything going yet, but a Ruby Amber deck.
We've talked ad nauseum probably at this point about Ruby Amber because we both want it to work so bad.
Yeah, I would love for it to work. It's not there yet, but as we talk about all the people that are out there brewing for different things, I think that there's got to be some options that are going to start surfacing as we get a little bit closer. Yeah,
I would really like to see what happens to the Bucky situation, because I think early on, before everybody figured out the whole, not figured out because everybody, from the beginning kind of knew how big a problem Sisu was, and shout out Sailor, who was probably the one that made the most commonly used Ruby Sapphire deck that's seen the most success. There's a lot more early on tools now that people are using to deal with the Diablos and the Buckies. But yeah, I think your experience with playing the deck and my experience on where it lacks is the draw power without Diablo. The draw power without Diablo is very, very lacking. Last set you had the Prince John stuff to help you out along the way. You had a couple of, you had your normal Ursula, Strength of a Raging Fire to get you there. Your Beast Tragic Heroes are obviously still there, and they were before, but there's just so many more Ruby removals that can deal with Beast that doesn't seem like as good of a tool. And so I'm curious to see how people deal with that low resource game, because I think there are so many more one-drops between the one-drop Diablo, the one-drop Robin Hood, the one-drop Pegasus. There's even some morphs being thrown in there that if you're not drawing to play into those options, then it seems like it's a lot worse of a matchup, because you don't have all those big bodies that can then quest for 2 like you did last time. If you're drawing a one-drop Merfolk, that's a lot better than a one-drop Robin Hood. If you're drawing a 2-drop Flynn Rider, that's a lot better than a 2-drop Bucky late game. And so I think that there's a few things to work out, but I think it clearly, since it won the tournament today, it still has a lot of legs to go off of.
Oh, no doubt that it has legs. I think it'll just be interesting how it continues to evolve.
Yeah, I think that one is going to have the most evolution. If again, we're talking predictions here for Chicago. My prediction would be that the Ruby Sapphire deck is pretty set in stone at this point. I don't think there's any really big changes to come. I think you'll obviously see a little bit differentiations in the lists on how many Medusas people run, how many Sisus people run, how many Be Prepareds people run, and try to get into the right ratio of all of that removal for their liking. But the other decks, I think, are a lot more up in the air on how everything's going. The Sapphire Steel, it's how many aerials do you run, how many bells do you run, how many Tamatoas do you run, how many early game fire the cannons and babooms and grab your swords and all that sort of stuff do you want to run, because there's just so many more. I feel like the counter plays that you have are so much more diverse with those decks that it gives you a lot more decisions to make on how to construct it. But yeah, and then again, on the Bucky side, I think there's a lot of, a ton of potential there. If you can get Bucky out on 2 and discard, then it puts you in a position to really deplete your opponent's resources and get going with your own engine. But yeah, I think from my prediction standpoint, on Top Cut, Top 64, I think Ruby Sapphire will be the best represented. What that count is, call it 25, 15, 20, whatever you want it to say, the actual count being. I think it will be the most represented. I also think number 2, gosh, I don't know, because I think number 2 will probably be Bucky. It seems weird to say that because I am the most wary about it, if you will. But I think it's the most established in the current meta, and everything has been designed, in a way that it deals with that the best. And so I would say that number 2. Number 3 being Sapphire Steel. And then I think we have to mention Ruby Amethyst too. In the local tournament we had today, second place was a ruby amethyst deck, and so we have to at least like mention it. So
yeah, I think you're probably pretty close on there. I think on the Bucky track there, as far as like making top cut, I think there's probably, like you said before that, going to be a little more variety in what Emerald Steel looks like. So I don't know if I would necessarily say like Bucky's going to be the number 2.
That's fair.
I think it's likely going to be Emerald Steel is probably in that 2, very close with Sapphire Steel. My one hope going into Chicago is that we see a little variety sneak into there, outside of those top 4. We know that those are likely going to be the top 4 that make up a majority of them, but what are maybe some of those off-meta ones that are going to be?
Yeah, I think we'll see a couple Mufasas or a couple like Ruby Ambers, whether it be Mufasa, like Mufasa heavy, or more of like a song kind of heavy like we've been talking through. Just because, again, I think there's still going to be very matchup dependent like runs that people have through the Swiss rounds that are going to, have a big influence on who makes that top cut. But yeah, the Ruby Amethyst deck specifically, I think, is going to be a sleeper on how well it does. The new Flynn Rider that I don't know if we've talked about that on the podcast yet or not, but the Flynn Rider that at the start of every turn, he said the frenemy says at the start of your turn, if you have a character in play with more strength than each opposing character, gain 3 lore. I think it's crazy to see the transformation of Ruby Amethyst, because sets 1 and 2 Ruby Amethyst were hardcore control, like control. There was no like real variation between that. Chapter 3, I think it went into, I would consider it a mid-range, maybe a tiny bit of control. You obviously still had tools like Be Prepared and your Medusas to deal with it, but it was still very much more mid-range because you were, trying to, go a little bit wide, get out your Minnie Mouse Surfers, and quest for a little bit early. Honestly, this might be a hot take. I don't know if everybody agrees with me on this or not, but I think the Ruby Amethyst build this set is an aggro build, because you get out Flynn on 2, and then on turn 3 you're playing a snake or a fox and bouncing your turn 1 character, and then you've got enough lore or enough strength on the board usually to continue to get those 3 lore for a couple turns, especially if you're playing Emerald Steel, and especially if you're playing Ruby Sapphire, because Emerald Steel has Diablo with 2 strength, has Robin Hood with 3 strength, which Fox beats, has Bucky with 1 strength, has all the 1-drops with 1 or 2 strength, and so you're basically out strengthening all of your Emerald Steel builds, and your Ruby Sapphire builds just don't have a character on board for the first 4 or 5 turns. And so to me, it's very much an aggro deck now. And so it's crazy to see that that transformation on its build and its identity.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting take when you kind of put it that way. I mean, looking at some deck lists, you don't necessarily look at it and be like, oh, that's an aggro, but I definitely hear your point.
Yeah, the whole, so the guy that came in second at the local tournament took the list that came in second on the online tournament. Basically, what he said was, I just took that list. Like, that's the one I took. And, if you're going turn 1, like Chernobog's Followers, turn 2, Flynn, turn 3, Bounce, Chernobog's Followers, turn 4, Queen's Castle, like that's really, really hard for people to deal with. And especially since you have a Fox most likely on board, you're getting the 3 lore from Flynn, you're getting the 2 lore from Castle. That's 5 passive lore. And you can't be prep because you have the Castle to deal with. You can't Maui because it doesn't take out the Castle in 1 turn. And then you at least, put a Stifling on Flynn to deal with. But I've played against it a couple times. I've played it with it a couple times. I think it's a really, really fun build, to be fair.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's one thing that we know, we can't have a meta without Ruby Amethyst.
No, and there was I don't know if you were in this discussion today or not, but there was a very strong discussion on what the meta in Chicago would look like and what's going to work and what's not, and someone made the comment on there will be Ruby Amethyst there, and I think we all kind of chuckled and said, yeah, Ruby Amethyst players seem to be very dedicated, I guess. Loyal might be a better term, but yeah, they seem to be very dedicated to their craft and continuing to brew within the color combos. And so there very much will be a lot of good, fun Ruby Amethyst decks. And I say fun because it's weird. I guess I'm pausing here and saying that because if I said that 3 months ago, I probably would have gotten shot for saying Ruby Amethyst is fun. But yeah, it just continues to evolve and change so much comparatively to what it was 3 sets ago. So.
Yeah. For sure.
So I guess the last question then is somebody completely unknown just going to pop out of nowhere and win this thing again?
I mean, that's kind of what I was wondering. I mean, how much of the existing top 64 are we going to see back and in the top 64 again? How much are we going to see getting up there into the top 8 and more than one Golden Mickey? That's a big deal.
If you, I mean, we can't like not, or you can't ignore the fact that these cards are genuinely life-changing money. Even getting to like top 16 and getting the Rapunzel, like that for most people is still life-changing money. I mean, if you're getting, I think we're saying like 5,000 for the Cinderella, like 1,500 to 2,000 for Let It Go, and what was it, like 12 to 15 for Rapunzel, and then like 50 to 70 for Golden Mickey.
At least.
So I mean, if you're making top 16, you're getting 20. If you're making top 8, you're getting 80. Like, that's insanity. Yeah. Like, and so I would imagine.
And that doesn't factor in the playmat.
Yeah, we've had some discussions around the playmat too and the pricing on that one. I have a feeling that that's going to be a much smaller portion. Like, call it even though it's a much more limited item than like the Let It Goes. I would say it probably. It feels weird saying it, but I think it probably ends up less than the Let It Goes, just because I think from a collector perspective, the cards are going to hold their value better.
Oh, for sure. That's fair.
But yeah, so it's that. So the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is finalizing this thought. People that made top 8, top 16, I don't see them stopping because they did that. I think people that made the top 16 and like got their invite, to the nationals at the end of the year, I could see a couple of them stopping and saying, "I'm good. I got what I wanted. I want to practice and do whatever, or play set championships, or continue to like build my skills or craft or whatever. Or I'm not in a position necessarily to buy a ticket and buy 3 nights of hotel rooms and all the stuff, all the expenses to go with that to try again. And so I'm just gonna, I have my ticket to the nationals and I'll go from there. But that being said, I would imagine we will see some similar faces. Zan Saeed, I'm sure I'm butchering his name. He made top 8. I would imagine to see him again. I would be very shocked if he didn't make top cut, to be honest. RMB, who is a friend of the podcast, I can luckily say made top 8 as well. So it's great to see him. I had a chance to talk to him for a minute on there. He said if he made, this was on day 1, he said if he made day 2 and made the nationals and got the Mickey, that he might call it and not go to another one. And I didn't have a chance to follow up with him since he did all of those things. But I would like to see some, as cool as it is to see the familiar faces out there, I would like to see a combination again. I would like to see a couple familiar faces on like people that have helped me. DeCandio didn't make top cut last time. The amount of like content that he's put out that has helped me and that has helped spread information throughout our local community is insane. So I would love to see him do good. I would love to see a couple of the other guys do good. But then at the same time, I'd love to see a Joshua pop out of nowhere with just some crazy deck that nobody expects and just like take the weekend by storm. So we'll see.
Oh, I agree. You want to see kind of like on any sport, those stars make it far. Yeah. You want to see them be successful, but everybody loves a good underdog story. Right? I would love to see, some of those people that we know actually make it, because, those are opportunities you get to see them potentially on stream, see how they're doing, see how they're playing against these other ones, get some really good insight. But yeah, if we had another meta-breaking, if we had a meta-breaking deck show up this time, it would be so interesting to see.
Does everybody just go back to the drawing board then? It's like, okay, so clearly like there's this, meta that's going to stay the same. But do those people that like really know what they're doing say, okay, I got to go back to the drawing board and think of something just outlandish because clearly it works?
I think that's the thing that is very different between our first challenge tournament and what we'll see moving forward. Because that first one with our purple Mufasa, that's not good. The meta's done there. Set 3 is done. We're on set 4. We're all working on new stuff. But if something comes in like another meta-breaking deck, you're going to see people brewing off of that going into the next one.
You definitely will. Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. Even locally, like this last week after the Atlanta Challenge, I've played 5 of Joshua's decks, because everybody loved it so much and it was so fun. And so, yeah, if you have something meta breaking, I think it's going to happen. And I love both of your points on the underdog and you see familiar faces, because if we're wanting to grow the community and we're wanting to grow the game and the landscape of all this, if those familiar faces do well, like that drives eyeballs, right? And so if you want them to do well, and I want them to do well because I want them to have the success to continue to play the game, to continue to push the game forward. But at the same time, I think to your point, everybody does love an underdog story, and it would be great to see some crazy storyline pop up out of nowhere and get to follow that as well. And so you get the big people to get the eyeballs on the show, and then you have something crazy happen at the end to make everybody think really hard about what happened. So
yeah, no matter if it's one of the stars, no matter if it's an underdog. I mean, I don't think there's anything bad about a new meta coming in and just switching things up. We saw what Floodborn looked like. The more things that we can kind of keep adding to the meta and keep driving it forward, I think is only a positive.
Yeah. The changes in the game keep it fresh, right? If you can have somebody come in and break the meta or change the way that the game is played or think about the game in a different way, which, as we mentioned, Joshua definitely did. He thought about the game in a different way. Keeps things fresh, keeps things fun, and makes us all continue to learn and grow, which is honestly one of the funnest things that I enjoy about the game, is that you get to continue to learn, you get to continue to try new things, you get to continue to play new cards. And so from that respect, I'm really happy to see how things go. But yeah, we'll be back to talk about the results and to do our initial meta breakdown, as we've discussed in the past, on what the meta looks like, how it's shaping up going into set championships. So when that episode releases in a couple weeks, it'll be like right in time for everybody to make their final decisions and start prepping for set championships. So I think that kind of covers it. And any final thoughts from you on either Atlanta or Chicago or beyond?
No, I mean, it was fun to watch him follow along virtually. There's a lot of things to cheer for, even here locally, like you said, with Devin. I'm excited to see what comes of Chicago. That I'll get to attend my first one in Dallas. So I'm definitely going to be having my eyes on that, seeing how everything shakes out, and using that information not just for Dallas, but really when I want to play in the set championships.
Yeah. I don't think anybody locally is going to Chicago, are they?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, but everybody, we're 5-ish hours from Dallas, or Fort Worth. I say Dallas, and I think if you're from the area we are, everybody just calls the area Dallas, but from Fort Worth. And yeah, so I think actually every single person, all of the people in our inner circle, which is 6 or 7 people, and then there's a larger group of probably another 6 or 7 people, and I think all of them are going. So it's going to be a fantastic time to go to Dallas.
Yeah, we're going to have a good representation there from North.
We got to have it. We got to have another top cut.
Yes,
at least one more top cut finisher to represent. Yeah, because and I guess I will say that too is. I should have said this on the Atlanta recap, but I think our local scene is insanely good. We had Devin, who I said made top cut. I came in second, I think, from the local scene with 41 points. I know we had 3 or 4 people with 38, 37, 36 points. And most of the people, and I want to say 6 or 7 of probably the 10 or 12 made really, really deep runs and really good. And so it makes me very thankful that we have such a good crew to kind of practice on and getting into those events. But anyways, I think that kind of covers it for today. Appreciate you stepping in and helping us out here on last minute, because I don't know if I said this or not, but we're recording this Sunday night for it to go out first thing Monday morning. So yeah, you did us a solid, and it's a good thing we finally got you on here, because we've talked about it forever.
No, it was a blast. I was really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're gonna. I think I don't know exactly how it's gonna work. Whether we do a live one in Dallas, after the first day, we bring the it's not a massive setup, but we bring the stuff and we kind of have everybody pitch in on that one and talk about the experiences of the day and do it on site, or if we do it right after. But we definitely have to have you back to talk about the stuff after Dallas, because there's gonna be so much stuff to talk about since everybody will be there with us.
That'd be a blast.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But I think that wraps it up for today. So as always, everyone, thanks for listening, thanks for supporting, thanks for continuing to be here, and we will catch you next time. So talk to you guys later.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.